Welcome. May the grace and the peace of the Lord be with you. Today I will be reading from Kalimatullah, the common word between us and you. Reforming Islam to honor Prophet Muhammad by following the Sunnah of the Messiah, by Archie Waring. Chapter 10. The nature of God is 1 Part 1. The being of God. We must begin on a common understanding of what we mean when we are discussing theology proper, the study of the nature of God. I will use Christian terminology, but here we will attempt to map names of Allah to the Christian terms to seek common word between us. I hope we can agree on the nature of God, but where you differ, please leave your thoughts in the comments. There is nothing else like God. All else is contingent upon Him. Only God is essential, without beginning, without end. God alone has aseity, from the Latin, from self, ase. Only God is self-existent. Only God is eternally and absolutely self-sufficient. He is uncaused and depends on no other for His existence. God is the Creator. All else is the created. In Islam, the attributes of existence, al-wujud, and non-neediness of others, al-qiyamu bin nafs. God's aseity in relation to time is His eternal nature. God exists apart from material, space, and time. In this way, we say God is beyond time and space. He is transcendent. There was no before, but only God eternally. This is the meaning of God's explanation of Himself that He gave to Moses. I am, permanent present tense, who I am. Exodus 3:14, the Eternal One. In Islam, the attributes of eternity, al-qidam, and everlastingness, al-baqa. God is not just transcendent, beyond time and space. He is also present anywhere and everywhere, without distinction, in time, all time, and outside of time. God's presence is incomprehensible. God is not a physical entity. His presence is ambiguous and without limit or restraint. This is what it means to say that God is omnipresent. In Islam, God is simultaneously above the universe and intimate to His creation. Surah Al-Hadid, 57:140. It follows then that all that has been created is known to God. All past, present, and future events in the world are fully known to God as all events exists in time. God Himself, being independent of time, knows all things timelessly, as a singularity. Furthermore, God is not just an observer, as all things are in accordance to His will. God is active in His creation. Cosmologists speak of the Big Bang at the beginning of the universe, an event from which all time, space, matter, and energy exploded into existence from nothing approximately 14 billion years ago. What they fail to appreciate is that this singularity they have described, including every event in the universe for the past 14 billion years and all remaining future time and events, were known to God as one instance before He spoke it into existence. In Ephesians, we read that God chose a people for Himself to redeem through the work of the Messiah even before He created the universe. For He chose us in Him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in His sight. In love, He predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ, in accordance with His pleasure and will, to the praise of His glorious grace, which He has freely given us in the one He loves. Ephesians 1:4-6. There is nothing hidden from God. There is nothing unknown to God. God is omniscient. In Islam, the attribute of knowledge, al-ilm. By definition, all that exists in creation was or will be created and sustained by the power of God. Nothing can exist that is beyond His power. Nothing can overpower His will. God is omnipotent. In Islam, the attribute of power, al-qudra. God is personal, a person with personal pronouns, he, him, his. God is not an eternal power or force. God has personal agency. He is the only being with true free will. He He does all that he pleases. As all that does exist and all that can possibly exist can only exist and remain in existence by the free will of God. In Islam, the attributes of life, al-haya, will, al-irada, hearing, as-sam, sight, al-basar, and speech, al-kalam. God is perfectly good. There is no evil in God. He cannot lie or deceive. God is omnibenevolent. In Islam, the names of the Loving One, Al-Wadud, and the Merciful are Rahim. God is moral perfection. He is faithful in all he says and does. He is by nature perfect in truth, justice, and righteousness. The angels proclaim he is holy, 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 Isaiah 6, verse 3. God is altogether different to his creation. He stands alone in infinite perfection. Divine simplicity is a theological term that has been used with many different definitions. Here, we simply mean to express that the essence of God cannot be divided into different parts. God is the pure divine essence that has all the divine attributes, and none of the divine attributes can be shared with another being or in any other way separated from all the other attributes of God. Any infinite, omni-attribute can only exist or be in the being of God. No creature can possess any infinite attribute. They are all inseparable from the being that is God. This is important when we contemplate any one of the attributes. We must not separate one from the other attributes, as if it can exist in any other than God. The all-knowing attribute, for example, possesses all power and is transcendent, as all-knowing only exists in the being of God who is one. This is God's Tawheed. The essence of God cannot be divided. God is one. In Islam, the attribute of oneness, al-wahdaniyah. What do we mean by the word being? To exist is to be. The being of something is defined by its essence, its intrinsic nature, the indispensable qualities that define it. Beings can be animate, alive or mortal beings, or inanimate. A chair has a kind of being. There are many different kinds of chairs, but they all share the essential qualities that define what the word chair means. You do not need to have seen every chair ever made to have confidence that you could recognize a chair when you see one. You intuitively identify the essence of chair being. In the same way, if we identified something that has the attributes of God, it is, by definition, God. It cannot be other than God, and possess any of the attributes of God. The divine attributes that we have just reviewed describe the intrinsic nature of God, his essence. This is how we define the being of God: his eternal aseity, transcendence, omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, omnibenevolence, holiness, and divine simplicity. God has more attributes than these, but not less. We cannot possibly comprehend God in full, but we must try to understand what he has revealed about himself, for we can only worship what we know. No other being can share in any of these attributes, as they are uniquely divine in essence. Christians and Muslims agree, and the Qur'an confirms it. We have no disagreement about the being of God. God is one, and there can be no other. Had there been within the heavens and earth gods besides Allah, they, the heavens and the earth, would have been ruined. So exalted is Allah, Lord of the throne, above what they describe. Surah Al-Anbiya 21:22. Allah has not taken any son, nor has there ever been with him any deity. If there had been, then each deity would have taken what it created, and some of them would have sought to overcome others. Exalted is Allah above what they describe. Surah Al-Mu'minun 23:91. We have no disagreement here. See episodes 17, 18, and 19, Chapter 7 of Book 1, explaining monotheism to polytheists, to interpret the sonship verses correctly. Christians fully agree with Muslims. there is only one God, and no other being ever becomes a God besides the one who is God. The Christian and Muslim would agree to all of the above attributes of God. The question is, do these attributes exclude the possibility that God could have three persons within this one unique essence of God? Muhammad encountered tritheism, three gods, in Arabia, where pagan idol worship was mixed with Christian ideas, and Allah was made to take a consort to father a son of God, taking Mary and Jesus as gods beside Allah, Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:116. But the Qur'an does not interact with the Christian Orthodox belief of Trinity, one being of God in three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. Hence, all that Muhammad taught and all that Moses taught, and all that the apostles wrote of Jesus in the New Testament scriptures about the nature of God can be upheld as true without contradiction if the one God is tri-personal. The question we should consider as we review the nature of God is, could God have had good reason to reveal his nature from different perspectives to different people over the thousands of years, from the time he walks with Adam in the garden, to when he revealed himself to Muhammad? Can the differences between the scriptures be reconciled like the descriptions given by the three blind men describing the elephant? Is it a possibility that what God revealed about his oneness could be reconciled with what he revealed about his personal presence? Can God be transcendent above the heavens and at the same time have a personal encounter with one or more of his creatures and not be accused of being two or more gods? What do we mean by the word person? Put simply, to be a person is to be self-aware, to have the ability to identify self distinctly from not self. In the doctrine of the Trinity, we are simply confessing that God is self-aware in a way that is significantly different to the way we, his creatures, are self-aware. God has self-awareness as only the omnipresent divine being can, in the first person, second person, and in the third person with omniscience from eternity past. In a sense, God is aware of himself and is able to be aware of his self-awareness in ways we cannot comprehend. We only accept it, because God revealed this about himself. I think he shared this with us so that we can get to know him more personally, like you might share something personal with someone else to help build a relationship with them. To be a person requires no physical matter. It just requires self-awareness. This is hard for us material persons to comprehend. We live in the material world that God made, so we only know material. But we have an intuitive understanding that there is something more, something immaterial and spiritual about our existence. If we assign any divine attributes to another being, we are making a second God, albeit a lesser God. This is what Muhammad's warning to the polytheists was concerned about. He was not trying to limit the abilities of God's being. The oneness of God's being is not violated by God having three-person awareness. We must not assign any of God's attributes to a creature, but we must also be careful not to put creaturely limits on God's abilities or on his essence of being. God's transcendence and immanence is one. Transcendence is a property of being beyond the material, physical realm. Immanence is a property of being that manifests in the material world. The God who is omnipotent, all-powerful, must be omnipresent, possessing both transcendence and immanence to perfection. If this were not true, it would be to say God has limited power. A being with limited power is not God. This concept is foreign to Islam, but it is revealed in the Qur'an and expounded upon in the Bible, Al-Kitab. In Surah Al-Hadid we read, "His is the dominion of the heavens and earth. He gives life and causes death, and he is over all things competent. He is the first and the last, the ascendant and the intimate, and he is, of all things, knowing. It is he who created the heavens and earth in 6 days, and then established himself above the throne. He knows what penetrates into the earth and what emerges from it, and what descends from the heaven and what ascends therein. And He is with you wherever you are, and Allah sees all of what you do. Surah Al-Hadid 57:2-4. Here in the Qur'an, we see God is ascendant above all creation, above His throne ruling all the cosmos, that is, He is transcendent. And at the same time, He is intimate with you wherever you are, the you meaning billions of believers. That is, He has immanence in His creation. It is only tafsir tradition that says otherwise. Muhammad didn't address this attribute of God's nature in much detail, not because he disagreed with the Bible, but because it is a challenging doctrine to present to illiterate polytheists. He needed to focus on the oneness of the being of God and not confuse them with the personal presence of God in His creation. We must not neglect this concept of God's presence in His creation to conform to Islamic traditions invented as polemics against medieval Christians. It is part of what it means to be omnipresent. Recall, divine simplicity means the essence of God cannot be divided into parts. There cannot be two essences, beings of God, one in the heavens and one with you wherever you are. Nor can God separate from His essence any of His attributes, like sending an ear or an eye to be with you. God cannot send down to His creation His presence to be with you, separate from His divine being. Wherever an attribute of God is, there is God in full divinity, but of course, appropriately veiled. Surah Ash-Shura 42:51. For there to be only one God, we must accept that the essence of God can be described by any of the divine attributes, and that description is a description of God. Hence, the essence of God is omnipresent, a property with notable ambiguity to include both transcendence and immanence. We can rightly describe God as being in the heavens above the universe, and yet at the same time intimately close in person with His creatures. The personhood of God is unique in this way. It is mysterious. We can only understand it in part, and only because God has revealed this attribute of Himself to the prophets. Not to every prophet, but in part to various prophets, so that the whole of His Al-Kitab reveals this about His nature. The God being, having self-awareness from the heavens, while also being self-aware from His presence among His creation, thus has two perspectives of self-awareness, the first-person and second-person perspectives of the omnipresent One. We must remember that the Islamic oneness theology is a medieval polemic that aimed to exclude the possibility of God being in His creation, to resist productive dialogue with the Christian dhimmi, the subjugated class of the Arab conquest of Eastern Christendom, who explained to the Arab occupiers that Jesus is the Word of God incarnate, and the Word of God is one with God, and therefore Jesus is God. That's the argument. But stay with me to grasp this concept as the steel man of Trinity. Don't remain in ignorance to mock a straw man. Understanding God's nature is serious business for those who fear God. As we saw in Surah Al-Hadid, God's transcendence and His immanence is not a foreign concept to the Qur'an. But we need to explore further the distinctions made between being and personhood, and see that the Qur'an confirms the Torah and Gospel as Muhammad made clear. In the Bible, the transcendence of God's being is expressed in the Father, sovereign over all the cosmos, and at the same time, the immanence of God's being is expressed in the Spirit, intimately close to you wherever you are, one being of God in two persons. In His transcendence, God is exalted above all of creation. The ancients would think of this as being above all the heavens, above the stars in the sky at night. We can extend that understanding. God is beyond the universe, outside of the space-time continuum that makes up all of God's creation. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Psalm 57:5. In his immanence, God is near to his creations on earth and near to his people. As the Qur'an puts it, so that he is with you wherever you are. Surah Al-Hadid 57:2-4. David's song of praise in Psalm 139 uses the personal name of God, always written as Lord in English Bibles in the first stanza. And then, as he contemplates the nearness of God, he switches to refer to God as his Spirit that is with him wherever he goes. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Psalm 139, 1-3, 7-10. See how the earthly presence of God is expressed by David as the closeness of God's Spirit felt wherever David goes. We appreciate also the anthropomorphic language of David's poetic words. God does not have a right hand that holds David, but David effectively expresses the intimacy of God's loving comfort toward him as the Spirit presence that holds him, like a loving parent might hold a child. Many verses in the Bible combine the transcendence and immanence of God's being to celebrate the mystery of the uniqueness of God's being in similar ways, as this Surah Al-Hadid 57:2-4. Know therefore today, and lay it to your heart, that the Lord is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath. There is no other. Deuteronomy 4:39. Am I a God at hand, declares the Lord, and not a God far away? Can a man hide himself in secret places so that I cannot see him? Declares the Lord. Do I not fill heaven and earth? Declares the Lord. Jeremiah 23:23-24. This concept of God filling the heaven and earth is a way of expressing his omnipresence. To say God has two personal perspectives is only to recognize that God is looking down from the heavens with a bird's-eye view, while at the same time seeing all on the earth from all earthly viewpoints as well. Going indoors, so you are hidden from the sky, will not prevent God seeing what you do. This is not controversial to interfaith agreement, but obvious as revealed in all the scriptures. God had revealed to Muhammad a description of the Ark of the Covenant to teach him of the nature of the God who dwells in person with his people intimately, while still remaining the infinite, omnipresent God above the heavens. In the book of Exodus, Exodus 25:10-22, God gives instruction for the Ark of the Covenant to be built, a wooden box overlaid with gold, with a golden lid that had two golden angels sculptured, prostrating toward the center of the lid to focus attention at what was called the mercy seat, the place where God would dwell. Moses had 3 sacred sets of objects put inside the ark: a bowl of manna to remind the Israelites how their God provided for them in the wilderness, Aaron's staff that had budded miraculously to confirm that his bloodline was chosen for the priesthood, and the stone tablets that God had written the 10 Commandments on with his own finger. Hebrews 9:4. A verse describing this ark is included in the Qur'an, but it baffled the early Muslim scholars who did not understand it. Their prophet further told them, "The sign of Saul's kingship is that the ark will come to you, containing reassurance from your Lord and relics of the family of Moses and the family of Aaron, which will be carried by the angels. Surely in this is a sign for you, if you truly believe." Surah Al-Baqarah 2.248. What is the sign the Qur'an is referring to that you will accept if you truly believe? In the days of Moses, the ark was kept in the tent of meeting, where Moses went to speak with God face to face, as God was in the presence above the ark. The relics of the family of Moses and Aaron is a very 7th century phrase, as the Christians in the medieval period would call any religious memorabilia a relic, but this clearly refers to the stone tablets of God, the bowl of manna and Aaron's staff. The Quranic verse refers to the ark being carried by the angels, referring to the sculptured golden angels on its lid. What the English Bible translates as the presence is the Hebrew word Shekinah, Hebrew Shekinah, which means dwelling place. See the list of ayah on the screen, where this word, meaning the presence of God in the creation, is used in the Qur'an. From the Hebrew scriptures, it is clear that the Shekinah is the personal presence of God. In this verse of Al-Baqarah, the Arabic word sakinah, which also can mean dwelling place, is translated reassurance, or in other translations as tranquility. However, if we connect the Qur'an with the Torah rather than the Hadith, the meaning is clear. The Shekinah is the personal presence of God dwelling above the Ark of the Covenant, a second-person presence of God as confirmed by numerous verses in the Qur'an and Tanakh. When Solomon built the first temple, God's presence, the Shekinah, filled the temple. It was a sight to see awesome in glory. But Solomon acknowledged that while God was personally present in the temple, God was not confined to the temple, as God is bigger than the whole cosmos, ascended above the heavens. Nevertheless, the scripture says God dwelled in the cloud, just as he dwelled in the pillar of cloud that led Moses and the Israelites out of Egypt and above the ark. That is, God is intimately close to you wherever you are, Surah Al-Hadid 57:2-4, and he can choose to personally dwell to intimately speak face-to-face with Moses, Exodus 33:11. And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built?" 1 Kings 8:10-13-27. God's presence was in the dark cloud that filled the temple, and his glory remained in the temple approximately 370 years, until just before the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. Ezekiel describes how the presence of God departed from the temple. A great accompaniment of cherubim, throne angels, came down from the heavens to escort the glory of the Lord out of the temple and up into the heaven departing Israel. Ezekiel 10. The Israelites had forsaken God, so God withdrew his presence from them. We need to wrestle with these verses. In some way, God's presence withdrew, but God's omnipresence is everywhere always. We see that it is God's personal, intimate relational presence that departed Israel. We say the Spirit of God departed, but God remained omnipresent as the Father of all creation. Shortly after, Jerusalem is destroyed and Israel is led off into captivity. The prophet Ezekiel revealed this. "And the glory of the Lord went up from the cherub to the threshold of the house, the temple in Jerusalem, and the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was filled with the brightness of the glory of the Lord. Then the glory of the Lord went out from the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. And the cherubim lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth before my eyes as they went out, with the wheels beside them. And they stood at the entrance of the east gate of the house of the Lord, and the glory of the God of Israel was over them." Ezekiel 10:4, 18-19. Hence, we can agree that God's omnipresence means he sees not just from the sky looking down, but from an unlimited set of viewpoints. God can also dwell upon the earth. His personal presence does manifest locally in form, as the Shekinah upon the ark, in the temple, in the burning bush, and in many other ways. Surely in this is a sign for you, if you truly believe. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:248. In the next episode, we will explore the Islamic interpretation of the Spirit of God and see if the traditions of Islam contradict the Qur'an and create partners with Allah just to oppose the Christians. I hope you will join me as I continue the reveal of the Steelman argument for the Trinity. Until then, may the grace and the peace of the Lord be with you.